Tonight's panel event will explore the anatomy of a college admission decision from different perspectives and different institutions, and then also generically. And I'll begin by telling you how excited the college counseling team is to work with you in the coming months, both students and parents, and in the coming year. It's kind of scary and exciting to think about, if you fast forward about 17 months or something like that, you're going to be packing up your suitcases and heading off to college. So we're excited for you, and you're in good hands. For those of you that I have not yet met, my name is John Buzang. I'm Director of College Counseling. This is my 19th year at Wilbraham and Monson. It's hard to believe. I had a full head of hair when I did arrive in 2000. And this is Maureen Kelly-Chesky. Maureen is a WMA alum, and this is her 12th year as Associate Director of College Counseling. This is Greg Walsh. Greg has over 30 years of experience, mostly in college counseling at independent schools, and this is his second year with us. And there's Mr. Bill Wells. He's the Director of Student Promotions, and he also counsels a number of postgraduate students. So, I actually had to edit that, Bill, because Bill gave up his time. He was supposed to be up working on the atlas to get the next issue out, so thank you, Mr. Wells. And last but not least, Sandy Scott is our office manager. Sandy is a real gift to us. She has 21 years of college counseling experience as our office manager. So tonight's format is intended to be interactive, and just one housekeeping item, if you could just make sure that your cell phones are silenced, that would be very helpful. After introductions, each of our guests will offer about an 8 to 10 minute overview of the admission process at their respective institutions. Mr. Walsh will then moderate a question and answer session for about 45 minutes or so. And if you have a question in that time, please just raise your hand. There's a microphone there. We also have a wireless mic we can pass around. And then for the last 15 minutes or so, we will open up the floor again to questions. So students, if you do have a question, please feel free to use that. Parents, we can walk the wireless mic to you. At 8 o'clock, Aaron and Eric, unfortunately, will have to hit the road. They've come a long distance, but Chris has agreed to stick around. We're going to have a coffee and cake social. Students are free to go at that time. You can stay if you want. Parents would love to have you if you have any questions or just to get to know you. Let's see. So, it is a pleasure to introduce Aaron Bernard, Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at UMass Amherst. Aaron has worked for the university for 8 years and heads up the tour and information session programming for the undergraduate admissions office. Aaron has read applications for the Eisenberg School of Management, in addition to other schools within the university, including applications for computer science this year. So any of you kids, if you have an interest in computer science, feel free. In addition, she is responsible for recruiting and high school visits in Hamden and Hampshire counties in Massachusetts. Erin graduated from Trinity College in 2008, where she played women's ice hockey while earning a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. She went on to earn her Master's of Education from Springfield College in 2010, and she's been the head coach of the Smith College women's ice hockey team for the past 8 seasons. I'd like to welcome Eric DeAngelis from Brown University. Eric began his 15-year admission career at his alma mater, the University of Rhode Island, where he received both his bachelor's and his master's degrees. He then moved on to Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island, and currently serves as Associate Director of Admission at Brown University, where he's worked for the past 9 years. Eric's admission work has taken him to nearly all 50 states and 10 countries. He's read more than 30,000 applications in his career, and he's presented at regional and national conferences. Eric currently serves as Vice President of the New England Association for College Admissions Counseling and is past President of the Rhode Island Association admission officers. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce Chris O'Brien, who joins us from Miss Kelly Chesky's alma mater, Boston College. Chris is currently the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission at BC, where he spent the past 20 years. And just told me a story, you met your wife on the road, both admissions people, right?
Yeah.
So,
I met my wife at a college fair.
it's pretty cool. Yeah. You woke up that morning and you didn't think that was going to happen, right? Yeah, all right. Chris serves as the athletic liaison in the office and is the advisor to the student admissions program, guiding over 800 student volunteers who give campus tours for Boston College. Prior to joining the admissions team at Boston College, Chris spent 2 years in admissions at Wentworth Institute of Technology and 3 years at Fairfield University. He earned his Bachelor of Arts from Holy Cross and his Master of Arts from UMass Boston. Chris lives nearby in Westfield. And just for starters, I'd love to give a warm welcome and a round of applause for you folks for coming here. Thank you very much. So we'll start by, I don't know, who got the short straw or the long straw? Where do you want to start with just a maybe 10-minute overview of how you read application, what you look for?
All right, so once again, my name is Erin Bernard, and I work for the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, not too far down the road. So I'd like to start by just letting you guys know that at this point in the process, I think it's really important that you're kind of taking a look at all of the different schools that you can possibly apply to, possibly go to, and so that starts by understanding, I think, the difference between a lot of schools as like a broader category. So UMass Amherst, we are a state school. We're a large school, about 22,000 undergraduate students. And there's not, like one specialty. We're not just a science school or just a, liberal arts school. We really have everything, a lot of different majors. We have over 90 different programs. So that's kind of something that you want to start thinking about as you're looking and hearing from different schools of something that you think the kind of environment that you might want to be a part of when you get to college. So as far as applying goes, I'll just start by saying we have 2 deadlines. The first is early action. So early action, which is different than early decision. Early action is non-binding. You apply by November 1st. You find out usually mid-December to mid-January. You still have till May 1st to make your decision. Early decision is binding, so if you get in, you have to go to that school. So once again, we do not have early decision. But early action, it's pretty much the same thing, just an earlier process. Regular decision is deadline of January 15th. And once again, you have till May 1st to make your decision. So by choosing early action versus regular decision, there's no earlier decision process. May 1st is the national deadline of when you need to decide where you're going and make your deposit. So you just have a longer time to decide, hear back from other schools, get your financial aid packages. You can still do all of that with early action. For us, when deciding between early action and regular decision, and I think this can go for a lot of other schools, you really want to think about, if I'm applying to a school by November, am I comfortable with my application, what my application says about me in my first 3 years of school, especially academically? So a lot of times I don't have your senior year grades yet when I'm looking at your early action application. So do you feel comfortable with your freshman through junior year grades? And if the answer is yes, I think that's a great reason to apply early action. But sometimes you have some students with guided counselors lovingly called late bloomers. And they might need a year, another semester of grades to kind of show this is the student that I am now, whether my freshman year says differently. Now I have 3 strong years of grades, and this is the kind of student that I'm going to be in college. So that's just something to think about. There's no perfect answer. You definitely need to work with your counselors to decide what's best for you. I will say that something that's a little bit different for us this year, a trend that I'm starting to see, is that our competitive majors is becoming more beneficial for you to apply early action. So when I say competitive majors, these are the Eisenberg School of Management, Computer Science, Engineering, and Nursing. So all of those 4, if you're thinking about that, it has proven over the past couple of years to be beneficial for you to apply early action. It's not always planned that it's going to be beneficial, but that tends to be how it's been working out. So that's something to think about, that if those are the areas you're interested in, for us, you may want to think about applying early action. And that's a good question to ask a school. You know, I know a lot of schools for nursing, they'll have priority deadlines. So that's definitely a question that you can kind of keep in mind if you're interested in a major that, you know, you go to a college fair and every school starts saying, oh, that's our most competitive major, or that's one of our most competitive majors, which especially if you want to be a nurse, you'll hear that a lot of the places that you go. That's a good question to ask the schools that you're visiting. So once you've decided what date to apply for, what major to apply for, we are on the common application, which a lot of schools are, so it's pretty easy to fill that out. You want to start thinking about your essay. For us, the essay is really important to kind of figure out a little bit more about you. I remember a piece of advice that somebody gave me that I really liked when I was applying to schools was, they told me to write down everything I wanted a school to know about me, all of the things that I thought made me stand out, all of the strengths that I think I had. And then before I wrote my essay, they told me to cross off the things that were already shown in my application without the essay. And if there was anything left over that I felt like the school really needed to know about me that I maybe didn't cover in the rest of my essay, make sure to highlight those things in my essay, which I thought was a really great piece of advice, especially for someone who was really struggling to figure out what to write my essay about, which I think is pretty common. So once you kind of have your recommendations, which I can say right now is a really good time to start thinking about who you want to be your recommenders. You're kind of at that point right now where, it's junior year and these tend to be the teachers that are going to be the teachers you choose for your recommendations. Your test scores, ACT, SAT, whatever works for you. We do super score, and so super score is when we take the best individual section of the test, the best score that you get on that individual section, and we'll add them together. So if you've taken the test 2 or more times, let's say for SATs you get a better math score the first time you take it, and a better reading score the second time, we'll take those 2 separate scores and add them together to give you the best possible outcome. And we always take the test that benefits you the most. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about taking tests. And if you, like I said, ACT, SAT, it doesn't matter to us. We do it for both. We do have member questions. Some other schools have extra essays, so that's something to keep in mind and pay attention to. Our member questions are optional, but when I'm talking to a student, I don't hold it against you if you don't fill them out because they are optional and the school said that they're optional. But I always relate it when I'm talking to students where if you were playing a sport and the coach said that it's optional practice, that doesn't really mean it's optional. It means that if you had something that really conflicts, that's fine, but really it's saying something if you're not there. So, like I said, I wouldn't hold it against you for not filling this out, but if this is the place you really want to go, I would suggest to show that by filling out those questions. For the common application, I guess one of my best pieces of advice, at least for our schools, we do a lot of our communicating through email. I think a lot of schools do that, but we don't send much in the mail at all anymore. We'll send you an email to tell you when your decision's been made, to check your status on your application page, if you're missing anything, if we've received your materials, if you've received your application. So make sure that the email that you put on the common application is one that you check regularly. And I also like to tell people if you've had the same email since you were in 2nd or 3rd grade and it's Power Rangers 52 or something like that, you might want to think about changing it. Something with your name is usually more professional. But yeah, so other than that, as far as applications go, our application process, we look at your academic information first, so how your SAT and your GPA kind of coincide with each other, and then after that we look at your supplemental material, so that's your recommendations and your essay, your activities, and that's kind of how we make our decisions. I think that the recommendations, essay, and your activities really comes into play when you're that student who's kind of right on the borderline, and that could be borderline for admission, borderline for one of those competitive majors, borderline for the honors college. And we really start to look at what did your teachers say about you? You know, did they say out of my 10 years, this student is, top 5 students I've ever taught? How many leadership opportunities have you taken advantage of? Are you really passionate about something and that shows through your activities? So things like that become really important, especially for those borderline students. The honors college process has gotten a lot more in-depth into those things that I just mentioned, your recommendations, your essay, and your activities. And so that's something, if you're interested in the UMass Honors College, it's something to really understand. It's become very hard to get into, and how it used to be, you have this GPA, you have this SAT, and you get in. And now it's really, you have this GPA, this SAT, and you kind of get thrown into the pool, and then everything's equal once you're in that pool. And we're looking at like I said, your leadership activities, any kind of community service, are you heavily involved in something? Do you work? What's your essay about? Is it a well thought out essay? Is it well written? What do your teachers say about you? So there's a lot of kind of other outside of academic things that go into the honors college review, and that's something to definitely keep in mind. And included in that is, what major did you apply for? Where are you from? So if the honors college is really something that you're interested in, I just would be happy to talk to anybody about it, but I think that's something that you really want to keep in mind because it's not as cut and dry as it once was. The competitive majors that I talked about, I think once again it's important to understand that those majors are becoming a lot more competitive, and like I said before, I think that as long as you feel comfortable with your freshman through junior year grades, you really want to think about applying to those early action. Let's see. Okay. So the last thing I just want to leave you guys with, that's pretty much our application process. We are right now about to getting ready to release decisions starting in March. So our regular decision people are going to start finding out soon. And we're having our admitted students events. So that's kind of where we are in the process right now. I just kind of want to leave you guys with a piece of advice that I usually do in my information sessions. And what I have a funny story about this afterwards too, but so what I heard from somebody that I really love is to make one night a week college night. And so if you have parents or family members who you feel like, all we really are talking about is college come senior fall, and it seems like that's all that's being talked about, is to have one night a week that you spend really thinking about college. And that way, if you feel like you need to talk to your parents on that one night, and you can kind of not have that be all-consuming on the other nights, then that would be a really good idea. I think that one of the beneficial things about that is if you kind of use that night to think about college, you can set yourself kind of mini deadlines. So you can say, you can even start it now, like how about by, let's say it's Thursday at 7. How about by next Thursday, I have just decided who I'm going to ask for a recommendation. And next Thursday, I'm going to take a look at the Common App essay questions, just so I can see what they look like. And then when it gets closer, it's like, how about by next week, I have just, written an outline of my essay, or, so it just it breaks them up into smaller pieces so that it's not Halloween night before November 1st if you're trying to submit all of your applications, and we have a snowtober, or there's some hurricane and all the computers go down and people start freaking out, which happened a few years in a row. So it just kind of helps do everything earlier. I have 4 brothers and sisters, they're quadruplets. And luckily, I was in college when they were applying to college. But my mom, whenever she hears this advice, why didn't you tell me that? Because she just felt like all she did was bug them about college things for a full year. And so I think that it can be helpful for some families and not helpful for others. But the funny story was, I heard this piece of advice at another school, which I thought really said a lot about the high academics at that school, but I don't know that I would suggest this. That was, how about you have one night a week that you don't talk about college? Which I just thought that reverse was very interesting and very telling about where I was. But yeah, I just thought that was funny. I think one college might be.
How are we doing? Oh, really? Because this college stuff seems to get people very anxious and nervous. Are you nervous about this college business? Does it make you anxious? I can tell you this, I go through it every year and I'm just fine. So I think you'll get through the college process just fine too. In fact, I know it. There's no question in my mind that all the students here are going to go to college. There's no question in my mind that you're going to come out the other side of this okay. Now, I might not know where you'll get into. In fact, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get rejected from someplace. And I promise you, if by the time you get to my age, if you look at your life and the worst thing that happened to you is you got rejected from a rich school that you probably should have gone to in the first place, you've led a pretty good life. But this process is an exercise that is very important. The world that you're going to graduate college into is more complicated than you think it is. And it's going to demand of you skills, it's going to demand of you perspective, it's going to demand of you patience. Things that you're going to learn in college. You have to go. You have to go to college. It's going to be transformative. Transformative for you, similar to the way that Wilbraham and Monson has been transformative to you to this point in your life. You deserve to go. All the work that you're doing, you deserve to go. And just because it's hard to fill out these applications, just because the price tags are expensive, just because there's a lot of stress in it, you can't shut down and not do it. You can't shut down and have the process done to you. It's not like you can't, if you can't figure something out, you kind of ignore it. You can't ignore it. You got to do it. You've earned it. You have to go through this process and do it. And there's no shortcuts. My colleagues, we've done a few of these this winter already. The process has already started for a lot of people. And maybe tonight it starts for you. And there's going to be a lot of hard conversations. And nobody likes hard conversations. I hate hard conversations. But you're going to have them. And these hard conversations are about yourself and your future. And they'll be unpleasant sometimes, but they're necessary to get you to where you want to go. I went to college 25 years ago. I basically never left. Like, college is awesome. Awesome. It's worth it. So you got to do it. What do we do now that you've met us? I mean, I'm sitting next to, two pros in the field. Look at us. Like, we're normal people. I'm a big hit at cookouts all summer. Like, everyone likes to talk to me about my job. And I'll tell you, and I can probably speak for my colleagues, when we read applications, we're not looking for the worst. Today, I was looking at students that we had deferred for early action to regular decision, and I was looking at their mid-year grades. And I was seeing their mid-years with C's and a couple of D's, and literally I would bang my fist against the desk, saying, oh, I can't believe it. Or when some student misspells varsity or captain, something stupid in their application, and I bang my fist on the desk saying, come on, like, what do we do? The competition can't dictate these mistakes. You have to do better in preparing yourself in this exercise for what's coming next for you. My job is to find out how smart you are. I can speak Boston, right? My job is to find out how smart you are. And there's a lot of evidence to tell me how smart you are. The school you go to, the courses you take, and the grades you get. This place is pretty good. You know it. Teachers have high expectations. You're with pretty smart kids in the classroom. You know you have to earn the grades that you get. You know what this place is about, the reputation. So, your choice to come to this school tells me something about you. The courses you choose throughout your academic trajectory tell me about you. Hey, next year you can take a math, you can take fractions and decimals, and you can get an A, and your transcript will look so sexy with that A. But how do I know that you're any smarter than kids that are getting B's in AP Calculus? You're probably not. When we're trying to find out who the smart kids are at every school, we're looking at the choices that students make. We want students to take rigorous course loads. We want students to be with the best students in their class. We want students to be challenged. Now, it's an old joke in our field. They're all AP classes with us. So we want students with the most unreasonable teachers and the toughest homework to be challenged in the classroom at what is an already challenging place. Junior year is the most important. By junior year, you should have figured this place out. By junior year, you have a little bit of control over your academic schedule. By junior year, you can even show what your strengths and weaknesses are. We see all of junior year, we can pretty much tell what kind of student you're going to be. So, for those of you that are in your junior year, don't screw it up. If you screw up junior year, there's not enough time senior year to fix it. Senior year goes by in a flash. And there's already a million things you got to do senior year. Some of them application related, but all the other things that are traditions at this school and all the other classes you'll have senior year, don't wait till senior year. Do it now. Have a great junior year. Like, stay focused, don't get mono, like, have a really good junior year. Right? I promise you, if you kill this junior year, you're going to go into senior year with so much momentum that it's just going to be a natural academic ascendancy that you have as you go through your senior year classes. The school you go to, the courses you take, the grades you get. Biggest piece of evidence to find out how smart you are. And then, all this other evidence is there for us too. How you fill in circles with number 2 pencil, how you write. And writing is so important. Like, we don't ask for college lab reports, we ask for college essays. It doesn't matter what you do in your life, you're going to have to write. Write with a purpose. Write to convince something of something. You want a job or a raise, you have to be able to put it on paper and convince something. So how you write is very important. It's a super exercise to find out how smart you are. And what you think is so darn important about your life that you're going to write your college essay, which might be the most important thing you write until your wedding vows. What are you going to write about? I'm dying. What do you think is important? What have you come through? What's inspired you? Can you write a paragraph that has a topic sentence and descriptive sentences around it? Can you write a story? Can you tell a story? These things are great. A big part of our application process at Boston College is how you write. We're a liberal arts school through and through. We have a core curriculum. We expect our students to write. Even if they're nurses, if they're in the business school, it doesn't matter. They're going to write. And then, as my colleague alluded to, we're very concerned with your engagement in the classroom. I talked a lot about the admissions process at Boston College. Said there's 2 kinds of students. There are the students that accumulate academic statistics with their heads down, blocking out the things that can't be quantified on a college application. And then there are students that accumulate academic statistics and they do it with their heads up. Because they lead discussions in the classroom and they're entertaining in the hallway and they're involved in their school and they make decisions in their school that are engaging and are accountable to their classmates. When colleges have these students to choose from, they're going to choose 2 every time. Because colleges aren't kennels where we keep students in for 23 hours a day. They're out for 24/7. They're painting their face and they're going to football games. They're joining clubs. They're getting involved in all the things that happen at our colleges and universities. So what kind of decisions you make, and those decisions could be in Shanghai or Springfield. The decisions you make in these times, whether they're service-related, whether they're activism, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's martial arts or Irish step dance or athletics, whatever it is, tell us those things that you do. Because we're going to see a ton of students that have more good grades than bad and fill in more circles right than wrong with the number 2 pencil. But what kind of high school student will you? And I think you could be a really good high school student, not just looking at your academic statistics alone. How much have you taken advantage of here? There aren't many of you here. So for this place to run, students have to wear many hats. So athletes have to get involved in service and student government, and actresses have to get involved in other parts. That's how the place works. You can't just be along for the ride. Hey, if you went to Minichog, or you went to some big high school, you can let someone else do all that work. You've got to be involved in many things here. That's how the place runs. I think the biggest shame, and the thing that would hurt you in a college admissions process, is after 4 years in this place, the only thing you had to show for it in your resume is you played 1 season of JV golf. What a waste. I think you've been given a lot here. Much is expected. And those things are academic, but those things are extracurricular and community-based. All along the way, trying to find out if you've got a generosity of spirit. Be a good kid. Sure, we're a Catholic school, so that has other holy ramifications. But have you made your community better? And we'll find that out from the way that you've chosen your extracurriculars, but we'll find that out from your teachers. What do you like in the hallway? What's your reputation in the community? You know, all 3 of our institutions, and many, many others that you're interested in, are going to have far more applicants that are qualified than they can ever admit. So they're going to admit the ones that not only bring to them the academic statistics, but bring to them these other qualities that will make them great community members. And seeing those decisions that you've made, really since freshman year, can help us understand what you've done here and how to do it with us. I think a college admissions process is far more about performance than potential. Any student here can tell me, wait till college, I'm going to be an A student in college. You can be a D student here, and you can say, I didn't really like it here. Wait till I get to college. And like, potential is something that can't be limited. Performance tells us, if you've got that performance at a great place like this, you're going to be that makes you a good high school student, you're going to be a good college applicant. Now, for Boston College, we're fortunate that we have 30,000, 32,000 applications this year. And again, we have to spend a lot of time with applications. We don't have like a committee, it's just one person that reads the applications from Western Mass, or the applications from upstate New York, or the applications from Singapore. Like, we only have to be experts at one certain part of the world. So we're not comparing you with anybody else in the world until we compare you to what you've done here. We don't recalculate anything. We need to know what you mean here. And we make sure we know what this place means, not just what the average class size and where students go to college from here, but what it really means to be a student. And then, when we can compare you to what you could have done here, then we can compare you to everybody else. So keep doing those good things that you're doing here, because colleges like ours and the admissions people like us appreciate what you've done and understand the school that you go to. I'll stop there. But I encourage you to use this time for questions for these my colleagues, because I think it's the questions that we want to make sure that we answer for you, so you can be as sophisticated a searcher for college as possible. Thank you.
You are always the toughest act to follow. Hello again, everyone. My name is Eric DeAngelis. I'm currently Associate Director of Admission at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. I too have been doing this for a while, for about 15 years, but I've also worked at 3 very different institutions at varying levels of selectivity and areas that people really hone in on in terms of the college admission process. So when I usually talk and give advice, I'm cumulatively bringing this from all my different experiences. I think a lot of what Chris was talking about, 2 things that I was gathering from what he said was, these are sometimes non-quantitative pieces of your candidacy that are very important to all of us. First thing is context. That's something that both of my colleagues have talked about, is looking at you in the context of where you are from, the opportunities that you are afforded, what is available to you, what you took on. But then the other big thing is character. Character is a huge piece of this process, and you can't measure character with SATs, you can't measure character with trying to exhaust an AP curriculum. You measure character by what you've given to your community and how people around you talk about you. Those are things like your letters of recommendation, or how you come off in things like an alumni or an on-campus interview that you might have with an admissions counselor. So those are 2 really central figures of this process to keep in mind. There are also a lot of uncontrollable factors in this process, things that you will never be able to control. And that will come down to like what was mentioned before. Many more applicants than there are spaces. Maybe many more applicants in certain majors or departments than there are spaces. And so colleges might be looking for certain things in certain years. For instance, at Brown, we just broke ground on a performing arts center. All of a sudden, we need cellists and clarinetists like you've never seen before. You know, right? So if you're a really good clarinetist or a cello player, you should do a supplement if you're applying to Brown. So the other thing is we might be looking for geographic diversity. We might be looking to increase our enrollment in certain departments on our various campuses, and particularly years. Some years it might be important, other years it might not be as high of a priority. So there are going to be these uncontrollable factors that you will be up against in the process that you shouldn't take personally. It's just a matter of the process. There are a lot of times, even when you become an adult, when you apply for jobs, you could be a very, very, very qualified applicant for a job, but maybe somebody else has a technical skill that that company needs at that immediate moment, and maybe you're not just quite there, you have a specialty in something else that they already have filled. So it's a lot of those things. So remember that context is important to consider. Character is something that is very, very important to us. And then the uncontrollable factors will exist out there. And so, you know, in terms of Brown, you know, we are operating. We understand we're operating at a level that is so uber highly selective that there is no kind of golden formula or set of rules that students need to follow in order to attain admission. And I really think for most of the colleges out there that really have like an under 30% admission rate, a lot of what I will probably talk to you about will apply to them in terms of how they look at applications, how they render decisions, and just what you should do as you think about if you are considering applying to very, very highly selective schools. I have a committee I'm presenting in tomorrow. I'm in San Diego, and so San Diego's up tomorrow, and you know, I'm looking at students that have, academic records like I've never seen before, but much like what Chris said, I'm looking to see what else they've contributed to the community, and it was either a participant here or there, or maybe tried something else but didn't have a lot of commitment to it. And then I read their teacher letters of recommendation, and the teachers say things like, you know, she really gets a thrill out of taking standardized tests, or he's very ambitious in trying to be the top student in the class. And those aren't necessarily traits that are endearing a lot of the times. We again want those students that exude the character that we know what we're going to get, and students that are going to make our places better. You've made your place great, so how are you going to also bring that to our individual institutions? And so when really highly selective schools are looking at apps, we are operating under this word that you're going to hear a lot of. You may have already heard a lot of this word, and it's the H word. It's called holistic. Has anyone heard this word yet? You're going to hear it a lot more as this goes on. A lot of people say, oh, we're holistic. But what does that mean? And holistic might mean something different for every institution that you're applying for. I can tell you my interpretation of holistic is that, yes, your academics and those quantitative measures are incredibly important in order for you to sort of kind of make that first cut in our process. But when I have an applicant pool of 40,000 and 85% of those applications academically meet the mark and are qualified to do the work, how do I figure out who are the groups of students that we're going to invite to become members of our class? And so that is when I rely on things like letters of recommendation, what you do outside the classroom, interviews, your extracurriculars, what kind of points of excellence exist within your application, what your self-presentation is like. All of that is going to matter to us. Because there are some colleges, and they will tell you that, you know, you don't need to send letters of recommendation. If you're applying to the University of California, they say we don't even want to see letters of recommendation. We're not even going to look at them. A lot of places don't even require essays. Erin talked about some of her questions being optional there as well. So you kind of have to get a sense of what the college is asking for to get a real good idea of what they're placing the importance on. I would also say that at Brown, we are very much a team effort in terms of when and how we are looking at applications. So like Chris mentioned, it's their job to be experts in individual areas of the country and the world and then render those decisions. For us, it's the same thing. We all have specific territories that we review. It is our job to become experts on the nuances and the issues that are occurring in those areas. I also read the northern New England states, so Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. They're going through this whole overhaul of proficiency-based transcripts something very confusing and something new for colleges to look at out there. So I need to know and understand what's happening in those areas in order to evaluate you within that context. And so I will look at your application in the context of what I know and what I understand, and I will do my write-up and I'll give you your ratings based upon academics and your non-academic rating and kind of what I thought, where I think that you'll fall in our process. And then that will usually go to somebody else. So we'll go to a second reader. Might be another person in our office that is going to be second reading for me, or we also have external people, so we hire temporary staff. A lot of colleges do this, where they're former admission officers, former college counselors, and they will also put reads on applications. We also have faculty look at the apps. They're the ones that are getting you for 4 years. We're only with you for a few minutes in the process, so we really want them to have a little bit of a say on who they're going to have in their classrooms. We do that a lot for super technical and quantitative fields. You know, I see computer science portfolios that come in, and I don't understand a thing. I don't even get past sentence 1, and I just rely on the faculty to tell me how good of a computer scientist this student is. And so we want to engage our faculty in that because, again, you are going to be having them in that classroom. And so when I'm looking in terms of like order of importance, obviously academic credentials are very, very kind of top of priority. What was said before is very important. Junior year performance and senior year course selection. Academically, that's the first thing we're going to look at. We're going to see how well you did in the courses that you elected to take, and then which courses did you elect to take in senior year. I will tell you that your goal in senior year is not to attempt to exhaust an AP curriculum or to try to take on more than you can handle. I see a lot of students try to do this because they think it's going to look better for certain colleges that they're going to apply to. And you need to listen to your teachers and you need to listen to your college counselors when they give you the advice of where they think that you should be placed. Because I would much rather see the student say, you know, I'm going to take the 3 AP courses because I know that that is going to help me achieve balance. I will be able to commit equally to all my extracurricular activities, and there won't be an issue. Instead of stretching for the 4 to 5, when deep down maybe you know that it's not something that you can handle. I know for me in high school, I did 2 AP courses in senior year, and that was it. That was all that I could mentally or physically handle. So know thyself. Know what you can handle and what you can do in this process, and listen to your college counselors. You go to a very good school, and when you go to a very good school, you also have the privilege of having really good college counselors in an office, by the way, that is dedicated just to college counseling. You have your local public high school, they're dealing with so many other things in huge caseloads over here, so utilize them and know that they know what they're talking about. We have really good close relationships with them, that's why we're here tonight, and so really understand that they're coming from a place of watching out for you and knowing what's going to be best for you as well, so really take their advice super seriously. Something, when it comes down to, I go back to 85% of the students in the Brown Pool, for instance, academically have the chops to succeed. And so how do we start to parse down and figure out exactly who the students we're going to invite to campus? So yes, the academic credentials, but also sometimes we're going to look at things like your interests. What are your majors that you're looking to enroll in? Like Aaron said before, there are some programs where schools, they might cap the programs, so you might have to apply early in order to get a spot in those areas. Other times, we might be looking to build certain areas. So when I'm reading applications and I see someone who is dying to major in Egyptology at Brown, which I don't see a lot of those applications, and I see that they're really passionate about it in other areas of their life, I perk up a little bit and I say, wow, this is really interesting and unique and different. That's not to say that you should put a less known major on your college applications, because we look for evidence to support that interest elsewhere in your file as well. Don't just say, I'm going to throw on Egyptology and I'll probably have a better shot of getting it. It doesn't work that way. We're also going to be looking at what you do outside the classroom, so your extracurriculars. Extracurriculars can also include home responsibility, taking care of grandma and grandpa that lives in the home with you. Got to work a full or part-time job as well. That all counts. That's considered things outside of your classroom time. I'm not as concerned about what you do. I'm concerned about doing things that make you happy and bring you joy. All right, you're teenagers. I don't expect you to know exactly what it is that you want to do and what makes you happy right away. So I think it's fine to dabble in a couple of things here or there, but we do like to see some common thread, some level of commitment, and we do like to see some leadership emerging in there. That doesn't mean being captain and president of everything that you join. It also doesn't mean being a founder of 47 different clubs on the campus as well. It is perfectly fine to be a follower and somebody in the background, because those can be very powerful people on a college campus, and we need those people just as much as we need the people at the forefront of the initiative. There are also things, like I said before, those institutional priorities, those uncontrollable factors. We need more clarinet and cello players next year. We want to increase the amount of students in our humanities. We want more students who are the first in their family to go to college on our campus. We want more students from the Midwest represented on our campus. Those are all things that are not controllable, and they're really dictated by president, board of trustee, people that are a lot more important than I'll ever be. And so we just take our directives from them. The last couple of things I'll just mention to you about the search process that you should be aware of are, the first thing is called being a need-blind institution. Brown is a need-blind school. So what does that mean? That means when it comes to students who are seeking financial aid, that we do not render our decision based upon the ability or inability for a family to pay the full cost of tuition. So we make those decisions completely independently. Not every school out there is need blind. Some schools might need to take that into consideration because they're not working with the same kind of financial aid budgets as some other schools are. Some schools cloak if they're need blind or not need blind. Some schools are very outward about whether they're need blind or not. Just know typically with really highly selective schools, we're really privileged to be in a situation where we can say, we don't care. We can make it happen for you. We'll fulfill 100% of the need that your family demonstrates via your financial aid application. So that's something to be aware of. There's also this other concept out there called demonstrated interest. Has anyone heard of this? So demonstrated interest, a lot of colleges will do this. Brown is not one of them, but some places will do this, where they will look, and we have very sophisticated systems now where we can see if you came to campus, what tour you went on, what info session you sat in on, did you click on this email, what link did you click on, how many times have you logged into your portal? I get applicants emailing me all the time saying, but I swear I checked this, or I swear I submitted this, and I can say no, because I have a thing that says on your iPhone in La Jolla, California, you opened this up last Thursday at 5 o'clock. It's creepy, I know. But it happens. And so a lot of schools will look at the amount of times you've interacted with them and demonstrated the interest. Did you visit with them at the high school in order to determine if they want to lean in to admit you? Because there's a higher chance that you would want to come to that school the more that you demonstrated the interest. Again, that is very specific to individual schools. Typically, highly selective schools do not look at that, do not care. I don't care if you've been to campus no times or 24 times. Some schools will use that as a part of their process, and a lot of them are pretty transparent about it, so just be aware of that. The last thing I would say is that you are going to be fine. You're going to be okay. My old team used to say it's not where you go, it's what you do, where you go that really matters more than anything. And in this high pressure, high anxiety environment, I would also say that you're under no obligation to talk about this process with anyone besides your college counselors and your family. I think a lot of you might be applying to a lot of the same schools. I've seen rifts in friendships and in social groups because some people get in, some people don't to one particular school, some get a scholarship, some didn't. So feel free to be private about it and keep it close to the vest. And like Aaron said, be very judicious about the times that you talk about it and the depth and the level that you talk about it with people outside that inner core. But you go to a great school, you have great college advising, you're going to a great education here. You're going to go to college, you just don't know where that physically is yet. So you all are the least of my worries when it comes to going to college. There are a lot of other students out there that we have to worry about, but you all will be fine. So I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you all for your advice. If you would like to come forward with any questions that you have, if you're stuck in the middle of the road, just raise your hand. But let me ask just one short follow-up. Aaron, you talked about early action. With the other two, you talked about early decision, which we also know is new for Boston College.
Sure. So Brown is an early decision school. We don't have early action. What early decision means that if you apply early, usually by November 1st-ish, and if you are admitted, then you are committed to coming to that school the following fall. At that point, you withdraw all your applications that you have to any other school, so there's no I want to see though if I get a scholarship from this other school. No, you committed at that point, so that's what decision means. I would say, with early decision, if you're considering early decision to any school, not just Brown, 3 things to think of. 1, if you had an acceptance letter to every college in the country, that school would still be the one you pick above all others. 2, just what Aaron said. If you feel that early in your senior year that you're comfortable with where your candidacy lies, where your credentials are, fine. The 3rd is you have to have that crystal clear conversation with your family about financial aid, because the anticipated package that you're getting is what is going to follow you into your freshman year. So making sure that you've done all that research, all the calculations and the estimates, and filed your paperwork. If all 3 of those things you feel good about, early decision, Brown or somewhere else might be good for you. Otherwise, you might want to hold off until a non-committed program. Chris has I believe there's also early decision 2, which I do not practice at Brown, but Chris will tell you more about how that plays itself out. Oh, and he doesn't know yet either, actually.
Thanks. So Boston College 2 weeks ago decided to change from early action to early decision. I'm stealing pretty much every word of what you just said, Eric, for every other information session like this, because I thought you really nailed it. Early decision 2 is just a second round that occurs after the first wave of admission outcomes are learned by students. So I guess what it means is that if we're your clear-cut second choice after your first choice rejected you, early decision 2 could be a great way to apply with the advantage of early decision and get an earlier response than April 1st. But as far as how BC is going to practice this, because it's our first time around, I have no, we've been praying about it, but I have no data in order to decide. I don't know how much of our class is going to be early. I really don't know.
I can give you a good scenario. I applied ED2 to the school that I went to. I applied ED1 to a different school, didn't get in, and then I was getting recruited by the hockey coach at Trinity, and he said, if you say you want to apply ED2, that means I know you're coming, I can give you a little help with the admissions office. So that worked out well.
Thank you on that. Come on up or raise your hand wherever you are. Questions? You must have some. Go ahead, just stand up. In case you didn't hear, I'll just repeat, why did Boston College switch from early action to early decision?
All right, so for many years, so I pretty much grew up at Boston College as a professional, and we didn't believe in early decision. We didn't think it was good for our institution, and we didn't think it was good for people. How's that? And now we've had to change our mind, because even if we were ennobled to think that this is a bad idea, no one else thinks it's a bad idea. Everybody's applying. There's a demand for students to be done with this process early in their senior year. And students are starting their college process earlier than ever, so they have enough information to decide whether they have a far and away first choice. We also had too many early action applications. So this year, we had a 60% increase in early action applications. So we went from 10,000 to 16,000. Now, I'm not trying to say that I'm the best admissions person. I'll let other people, if they so choose. But literally from October 26, 2018 to December 9th, without a day off or a break, or knowing who played football on Thanksgiving, I read applications, ate 2 meals, and slept. I did nothing else. That's unsustainable for human beings, but that's no way to choose a class. Whereas we can use early decision for students that see BC as a really good fit and use that same time to work with those students and find out if they're a really good fit for us. So there are a number of things that sort of intersected to make this change for us. I'm still coming, as you can maybe see, I'm still coming around on it. I'm being convinced every day that this is a good thing for everybody. I believe it will, but I still don't know how it's going to work its way out at Boston College. check with me in a few months, and I'll give you how the outcome looks from our point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your interest in Boston College.
Other questions? I know you have some. Go ahead. Stand up. And let me repeat, could you tell us about the most memorable college essay you've read? Maybe memorable good and bad.
Chris told a story on another one we did that like almost made me tear up.
I want to hear this one.
All right, so I had this girl a couple years ago, and so picture in your mind, it's like an October day in Lenexa, Kansas, and in a driveway, there's a car that's idling with someone in the driver's seat and someone in an empty passenger seat. And this girl tells a story in the essay about one day she was late for school, and her father drives her to work every day, to school every day. And she comes running out of the door and sits in the passenger side seat of the car and realized that she sits on what is an iPhone with 2 earbuds coming out of the iPhone. And it's her dad's. And she says, Dad, I didn't know you had an iPhone. You're playing music on your iPhone? What are you listening to? And she puts the earbuds in her ear. And the song that came on was Conga by Gloria Estefan on the Miami Sound Machine. It was the jam back in the 80s, trust me. So the song comes on, and she starts making fun of her dad. Dad, you got an iPhone, and you learned how to download songs. You downloaded this song. It's so lame, it's so old. And then there's an ellipsis, dot, dot, dot. And then there's a paragraph that tells a story about when she was 4. Maybe one of the girl's first memories. And when she was 4, she remembers her father coming home from work, sitting in the comfy chair in the living room, and Mom out in the kitchen cooking dinner, and she's so excited to see him. She's jumping up and down, and she finally gets her father. She's begging him to get up and dance, and do something with her. And they put on the music, and the song that came on was Conga by Gloria Estefan on the Miami Sound Machine. The next paragraph, she's 9, and the whole extended family goes on this Caribbean cruise. Grandparents, cousins, the whole bit. And every night in the ballroom, there's some function. And this particular night, there was a function. There's a father-daughter dance contest. Guess who entered? And finished second. Guess what they danced to? Conga by Gloria Estefan, Miami Sound Machine. And then her last paragraph is, you know, I'm a senior. I'm thinking about college. I'm thinking about homecoming. I'm thinking about everything else. And isn't it cool that my father almost had this song queued up for me to listen to remind me that while I'm going through all these changes, how about the changes that my dad is going through? Because the nature of our relationship is going to change when I go off to college, no matter where that is. At the time, I had a 5-year-old girl. So I was like in tears. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go on a Caribbean cruise, I gotta get an iPhone. I gotta enter dance contest. But the reason why it was so compelling for me, and a good example that I try to tell people is that it's not someone pulling someone out of a burning car on the turnpike. It's not someone tearing their ACL and then while rehabbing that tearing their other ACL. It's not the typical all-boys Catholic high school essay, you know, I volunteered to daycare to help the kids, but in the end it's the kids that helped me. Like, it's not any of that.
Not like that.
The reason why the Conga essay really nailed it was because it's a little story that when you pull back the camera, actually tells you a lot about the student, the relationship with her father, the sentiment, the forward-thinking. Usually high school senior girls aren't accused of that kind of sentimentality. And for her to talk about those kind of things that were bigger than just herself really told me a lot. I read ACT, her grades, kind of just like everyone else. But the way that she could tell a story and the way that she invited me in to understand what she's about, what's important to her, I was hooked. And I think sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I've had that, or I'm a dude and I don't like the kind of thing. Everybody has those. Tears don't have to be on the page, you know, to write an effective essay, but to be able to tell that story that, again, might be this minor part of your life that actually, when you take a step back, means a lot to you. It means a lot for us to understand that about you. I think that's what really does it. So that's the essay that I always use kind of to typify what maybe a really effective statement would be.
Do you want to comments?
I mean, okay, so you started telling the story, and I started jumping out of my chair, because 2 years ago, basically the same exact essay, except it was Britney Spears. Oh, come on, you know who that is, right?
I wonder if they heard your story.
Maybe they heard my story.
and then
Maybe they
go-
did. No, it's funny because mine is very, very, very similar. It was a boy from upstate New York, just outside Rochester, and how every weeknight after dinner, him and his mom would take walks around the neighborhood. It was just like a 1 mile loop around the neighborhood, and that's how they would decompress and just talk about their day and what was going on, and how, like, right before the beginning of school year, so in the summer, he kind of had this moment where he realized that these walks were limited, meaning that they weren't going to happen anymore because he wasn't even going to be there in 10 months' time. And we went to tell the story, this is when like the moms all start to get a little emotional. And so he kind of talked about it. He was using like, the sky was always changing, and he started talking, because like the sky changes in like winter and summer and stuff. He kind of went a little bit on a tangent and used that too much as a metaphor, but I got where he was going with that. But at the end of it, he was really talking about how that relationship with his mother was also changing, but for the better, about how when he got to college, he was going to have to be much more intentional about how he kept up with her. They weren't going to have the walks anymore, so how were they going to keep in touch? And it was just something he was fearful of. And again, this was like a very mundane thing. It's a walk around the neighborhood. It's jumping in dad's car and hearing the song. So these do not have to be like revelatory essays. They don't have to be about how I have, discovered a new butterfly, or I read that one today, and I did X, Y, Z in this other country, and I went on this mission trip. No, it doesn't need to be about that. Just pull back the veil on who you are a little bit in terms of like those little mundane situations. It's just like what Aaron said, write down what is not represented in your app somewhere else, and then maybe find a story about yourself, because again, that hits upon that character piece. And of course, all of the moms in the committee room voted in the affirmative for him, as did I, and he's, I'm sure, having a lovely experience at Harvard right now, so, because that's where he went instead.
Can I just add one more thing? So I had this happen to me. Tell me what you would do. On the same day, I read the essay of a boy who scored the winning goal in the Missouri State Championship soccer game. And then hours later, I kid you not, I read the essay of a boy who was the goalkeeper, who gave up the losing goal in the same game. So I thought it was remarkable that the two people that I read maybe hours apart, like are applying to the same schools and were in the same place at the same time and wrote their essays about it.
They should be roommates.
Well, that would have been great if I took the loser. I only accepted the winner. I take the loser. Unless you would have taken the loser. Would you have taken the, that's a judgment thing, right? We took the winner. But I should have had the forethought, my colleague from Brown, to have the two of you come together and make friends.
I would have loved to watch that.
Right.
Just so juniors are aware, we will be having some essay workshops after the spring break, and both through the College Counseling Office and probably through your English teacher. So it's good advice for now, though. Other questions, please. I've got a few that are frequently asked, but I'd rather hear what's on your mind.
The worst essay?
Or maybe topics to avoid.
Yeah, I always say if it's something that you're not going to tell your parents or your counselor, you shouldn't tell a complete stranger. Because I feel like I'm like, oh, nobody read over this essay before you submitted it, because they're telling me things about their life that are very personal, and things that I don't really want to know, I guess. My grandmother, when I was applying to college, always used to call me to tell me about application or essay, like things that she heard. I don't know. My grandmother hears something and then she'll call me to. It's always wrong. But she's the kind like she called me when I wanted to Trinity, and all she said is, I found out Trinity's not a Catholic school. I was like, yeah, no, it's not. She's like, oh. All right, bye. That's my grandmother. So she called me to tell me once that she heard a news story. Once again, the point of that is I'm not sure about her credibility. But that somebody like wrote their essay in blood to stand out, and
I would recommend that.
you heard about that?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm
Yeah,
saying I wouldn't recommend it.
she made it up. But she told me not to do that. I was like, thanks. But I think the point of that was that, you know, you don't have to force it to stand out. You don't have to force something. My old boss always used to say, like, if you're not funny, now is not the time to try new things. So just keeping that in mind, you know, that you don't have to force or make up a story of something horrible that could have happened to you. There's, you know, I think those are essays where it's very forced kind of come off.
I mean, just my opinion, my opinion is I don't like essays where they're about privilege. Like, I hate essays about horses.
I was going to say the same thing but felt bad in case anyone loved horses.
Right. I mean, so I grew up in Boston, so this is like horse country to me out here. Even though I was married at beautiful St. Cecilia's down the street, I can't stand horse essays. I don't get it. I mean, I know what a horse is, but I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. Or if you're going to write about your Saab, your brand new Saab, like I understand the relationship you have with a brand new car, but many of us, you have to think about your audience. Like, many of us have never bought a new car. So your new car really rubs me the wrong way, you know what I mean? I don't like poems.
No.
Write a, you know, we say write an essay. We don't want a haiku poem. We don't want a poem written in a circle that I have to, like, you know, print out. You know, I prefer not as much dialogue. I just want an essay. You know, I mean, I understand there are a lot of creative people here, and I think I think that you can use assignment, which is what it is, and your creativity and your thoughtfulness and your artfulness to write an essay. I don't think we're looking for something that's not an essay. We're looking for an essay.
You gotta meet your audience where they are as well. You know, you can't get. What I was gonna say is I read an essay yesterday, a kid, which is totally fine, but he loves anime, and he wrote his entire essay about that and how it connects to it, and it just lost me because I couldn't follow it. And if you sometimes write your essay about something so in depth, which is so niche, sometimes you can lose your reader, and it's just not very relatable to a lot of other people out there. I feel like someone wrote an anime essay because there are a lot of people there.
Well, I think the thing to kind of take from this, I think that's a really good point, is that you just never know who's going to be reading it. So it needs to relate. And I always say, you know, like, we always have those kind of typical essays, like the game-winning goal essay. And I like sports. I don't mind reading about sports, as long as it's not just like a play-by-play of your game. But I don't understand camp. And camp is another thing that people love to write essays about. People who go to camp love camp.
Okay, I feel like we should just list off the topics you should avoid. Horses, camp, torn ACLs, game winning, game losing, I'm sorry. And the animal essays, I always end up losing it.
Oh, I got another one. I can't believe, like, a cut from the team, that coach is the worst. They don't know what they're doing in that school. I'm the best player who doesn't play. Like, no sour grapes essays. I hate sour grapes essays. You know, they don't know I'm the best one here, even though I can't hit a free throw. You know, I don't like those.
It's a great question. Next fall, we'll be hosting probably about 80 different college representatives, most of whom will be the primary reader for your application. So that would be a great question to ask. What essays don't you like? Let me ask a question on behalf of some of you that's been asked before. and it affects about half the audience. How is your admissions process different for international students? Is it harder for international students to be admitted to your school, or do they compete with other applicants from their home countries, as well as students from their high schools in the U.S.? Do you have a quota for students from each country? Maybe extending that? Do you have a quota for any ethnic groups in the United States? Since that's been in the news.
I'll start by saying that quota is not, we don't do quotas, okay? It's illegal to do quotas, first of all, so we don't do quotas. Some schools, though, they will kind of have a goal in terms of international student enrollment. So they might say that we cannot go above X% of international students because of budgets, because of resources, because of whatever the case is. So that is different right there. I would say that at a lot of schools, Brown being one of them, we are not need blind for international students. So financial aid, we do give and provide 100% for international students that we admit. However, we're working with a much not as healthy budget for international and financial aid. We want to move in the direction where we don't have to worry about that. So, it doesn't mean if you need financial aid as an international student, you shouldn't apply to those schools. You definitely still should, but that is something that is going to be a metric that we're going to have to consider when making a decision. And then I would say that you're not compared against the students in your home country. So I read parts of the US, I also read half of China. So when I read students who are from China that are at a boarding school in New Hampshire, I'm not comparing that student to those at Nanjing Foreign Language School, because you're in completely different contexts, you're in completely different environments, ways of education, all of that. Kind of the benefit for a student that's already at school in the U.S. is that you've already gone through this transition. You know what it's like to be away from home. You know what it's like to kind of be part of the American education system in that sense. And so those students, we have less concern about their transition and how they're going to acclimate once they get to the college. And usually as international students, you are read, bought within your school. So again, within the context of the school that you go to, not necessarily your home country.
I also read Nanjing Foreign Language School.
Oh.
So we should talk about that.
We should. I just pulled it out of my head, actually.
No, that's a good one. I agree with my colleague from Brown on many respects, and then to take it a little further, when it comes to English proficiency, students that are here in the States at a domestic school have the opportunity to demonstrate English proficiency in a much more reliable format, English class, at an American high school, and I do think that helps us. Every college is going to use its different requirements. They might require a TOEFL or the IELTS, which are the two standardized testing for English proficiency, but some just ask for English taught at an American high school. Something to check, but English proficiency for students that are coming from another country where English is the primary language is something that we all have to consider. And then I think that Eric made a great point at distinguishing between international students at their home nation schools and those that have come here. But the catch is, if you come to a school like this, you have to participate in a school like this. Is that where we might get frustrated is for students that are international that come to American high schools and don't do what can be perceived as high school things. If you just are in the international club, like that's not the overture of learning about the culture. That's not the reason why you came here, I don't think. I mean, you can tell me, but I would think that you came here to participate in some of the cultural exchanges that happen. And those cultural exchanges might be running for kids' high school offense, or joining an athletic, like ice skating for the first time, or doing something that is very important to the traditions of Wilbraham and Monson. So I do have a threshold when I look at international students that are at domestic high schools. I expect them to do things that other students in their high school do, and not just do the things that international students do. So I do think, at least for me, I have an expectation that you'll make the effort of being like everyone at your school, and if not, being the kind of person that shares their culture and shares the beauty of where they're from with all these students from Wilbraham and Monson that aren't as familiar with your culture. So I do like that part of the international student application.
are viewed very similarly, and that includes international students. I would say that the difference internationally is usually, it's really more complicated yield rates. So the yield rates of international students who go to international high schools are different than the international students who go to domestic high schools. So that's kind of where the numbers get played with, and depending on the program, it might be harder to get in. But overall, everybody is read very equally. So just kind of everything that they said, I would have to look at that.
Does UMass have a quota actual for international percent, or no more out of than so much out of state?
No, we do not.
So some state schools do, most notably, I think some of the universities in California, where no more than a certain percentage, 10, 15%, can come from out of state. And that doesn't matter whether you're from Massachusetts or from Beijing, if you're out of state. Only a few more minutes. Let's get, please, just stand up and yell.
Interview process. Can you comment on them? Are there exciting interviews or interview schedules? What do you recommend a student do relative to interviews?
So the questions about interviews, and maybe just go through, because your different schools and probably have different policies and procedures. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, so interviews are going to serve different purposes at different schools. Interviews can come into play with things like demonstrated interest, like I talked about before. You are demonstrating that you have an investment in the school, you want to learn more about it, you're there on the campus, or you're meeting with somebody out in the world. That could be a reason why a student will want to interview. Another reason is purely to really learn more about the school to determine whether or not you want to apply or furthermore attend. Every school is going to be very different in nuance with this, so I do suggest asking that question to every school that you apply to. At Brown, we rely heavily, entirely on our alumni volunteer network. And at a lot of schools, they will have alumni volunteers who are trained by our office to conduct these interviews. They usually always happen in your hometown or the town that your school is located. So for those of you that are boarding students here, typically, I'm not sure how it works specifically with us in our school, but maybe they come here and set up shop in the library and do Mr. Bouzin shaking his head. Yes, so if you're applying to Brown next year, you will probably meet with an alum somewhere on this campus and do your interview here. Sometimes admission officers will conduct interviews for students depending upon the school. We don't do those at Brown, we rely entirely on alumni. The purpose of that interview can be evaluative in some cases. For us, I get a write-up on what your interaction was like, the kinds of questions that were asked, what that conversation was. Were you exuberant? Were you a little bit more reserved? What did you talk about? How did you react to certain things? It's also a great way to fill in the gaps in your app. So if you realize that there was something that was not reflected in your app that you can fill in via an interview, that is really, really helpful, especially if you've moved around a lot. I find that when I'm looking at an application, and so, again, I read San Diego, I have a lot of military kids that I've been reading the past couple of weeks, and so that interview, I get a full range of, this was their trajectory. They were born here, they moved here, and then the father or the mom got new orders, and then they moved. So it's a great way to fill in the blanks. Lastly, I would say the new thing that, specifically Brown is doing is instead of an interview, we're giving you the opportunity to do a 2-minute video of yourself to submit with your application in lieu of doing an interview. And that's something a lot of other schools are jumping on board with. It's our first year doing it. It's fun. It's entertaining. I think we get a lot out of it. I think that in some cases it's a missed opportunity for students. So if you are offered that opportunity to interview via a video, you probably want to have a little bit more of a conversation with that school about what they're looking for.
Juniors, you should be aware that WMA helps you with your interviews, which most likely would occur next fall and next winter. We offer mock interviews if you request well ahead of time. So I think what I'm going to do now is ask for just like 1 or 2 words of final advice, and I think Mr. Bouzin is going to come up and say goodbye, and juniors are going to check out to make sure that we got your attendance, and then off to study hall. Last words of advice, quick ones.
I feel like we can't end the college panel without talking about fit. So just making sure that you're choosing a college because it's the right fit for you. one of the few schools, you know, that you see in the news a lot or it's on the top of the list. It's really important that school is going to guide you correctly in, you know, in growing into the person that you want to become and that you're going to become. And that doesn't necessarily happen at every school. Really quick example, I'm interested in Brown for a short period of time, and I found out last year that they have a very different curriculum than a lot of other schools, and I didn't even know that. I just thought it's Brown, it's a really good school, I should go there, and that would have been a good fit for me. But yeah, so that's just something to think about.
Before I came up here, I was talking to 3 of my tour guides. We were standing around waiting for our information session to end, and we were talking about how we're early decision. And I asked the 3 girls about whether they would do early decision when they were students. They were all sophomores. One of the girls said, I wanted to come to BC since I was 4. I was like, okay. Another one said, BC was my safety, which I know is not in vogue anymore. BC was the place that, the last place I wanted to go, but it was on my list, so I came. And another person said, I got rejected for my first choice, and BC was my second choice. And I said, well, how do you like BC? And they said, oh my God, this is the place that we belong at. And I do think you end up kind of where you belong. But there's no way to cheat the system. You have to go through this. And I do think that, you know, you'll get to the place that you belong at. You might not know you belong there right now. You might be, you know, clouded by some other ideas that are in your head. But if you do this process right and you listen to counselors and the people around you that you love, they're going to make sure that you end up in a place that you belong at and really thrive at. And that's what all of us hope will be. Admissions people, we're not business people. We just want to push you along to the right place. And whatever we can do to get you there is important to us. And again, my experience tells me that you'll end up at the place that you belong at.
Very similar. I applied to college. I applied to 6. I got into all 6. I ended up going to the place that was at the complete bottom of my list because it was affordable and it was accessible, and neither of my parents went to college, and so it just seemed like the choice that was made for me. And I went kicking and screaming and thought I would hate it. And boy, wouldn't you know, I left kicking and screaming because I wanted nothing more to stay because I loved my experience there. And you do end up where you should end up in many of the cases. Being open to possibilities, being open to the fact that your mind can and will change over these years. I encounter these students that are saying, I am pre-med and I'm going to be a doctor. Yeah, I have a pre-med degree and I'm here with you tonight instead of somewhere else. Truly, you know, you will realize that what you like at 17 is very different than when you're 22. And so be open to the possibilities, be open to the concept of change, and just know that, you know, there isn't one place that you need to land. There are over 3,000 options in this country alone, okay? And what I said before, you will be okay.
Thank you all. That was outstanding. I wanted to add to that. My father had a saying, he had a bunch of sayings, and it's funny, your dad's sayings, when he's your dad and you're in the back of the station wagon, you don't hear them, but you remember them 4 years later. So you have 2 that stand out. One is bloom where you're planted, right? So bloom where you're planted. Liam, what do you think that means? Bloom where you're planted. What do you think? Okay, so bloom where you're planted means, you know, it ties directly to the other saying my dad always said, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. So, you guys get that? Life is what happens when you're busy making plans. I wanted, in the worst way, to go to an Ivy League school and apply early decision. I don't know what they were thinking, but they didn't admit me, right? So,
Sorry.
I wasn't Brown. And actually, Brown did not admit me. I did apply to Brown. But
I voted for you. I voted for you.
But I ended up going to a school that was not at the top of my list, and it came down to being 51% sure that I wanted to go there. And I was 1% more sure that I wanted to go to that school than the other school, right? And sometimes in life, there are those decisions that aren't clear, right? And after you do your pros and cons, and you do your gut check, and you make an informed decision, you go and look under every stone and try to find if it's a potential fit, right? We talk about that all the time in junior seminar parents, potential fit. We're in the fit finding business, whether we're on this side of the desk or that side of the desk. The fit finding business. It doesn't happen sometimes until you're in the spring of your freshman year, or even in the fall of your sophomore year, and that's what happened to me. And I was kicking and screaming at graduation day because I did not want to leave. And my godson just graduated from Temple University. He's my roommate's son. I've been in tons of weddings and funerals. It becomes the fabric of your life. Vacations, all that stuff. So, parents, that's why we also talk about the college search as really a treasure hunt, because college is a blast. College is so formative, right? And it's very fulfilling. Hopefully you go on to even more fulfilling things, whether it's a family or a career, whatever that is, and however you define it. But it is a very fulfilling and enriching experience that, if you look at it like a treasure hunt, juniors, and do the things one day a week, right? I think it's a great approach. But then really hustle this summer and do the things that you need to do in terms of the essay, the visits, and the prep. Even before that, getting in and developing the relationships with your college advisors, right? With your faculty advisors, with your teachers that are going to write for you. And doing a lot of the groundwork early on to identify potential fits. So then when you arrive, wherever you're going to go, at some point, probably in that first year, you're going to wake up and say, like, this is for me. Right? I want to thank, personally, all of you. You guys are great. Every time we do these things, I leave a little wiser, and hopefully